White Snake was suggested to me by Bill Rausch only about 15 months ago, I think. I came for a meeting in December, a year ago, and he proposed that I do an adaptation of this old Chinese story, of which there's many, many versions and many different adaptations and exist in many genres. It's an opera, Chinese opera, and parts of it are performed separately, or there are different versions of different parts of it that are performed separately. It's numerous movies, including one just from last year with Jet Li in it. It's popular, like there's novelizations and serializations of the characters that continue the story. So it exists in all kinds of forms. It's the very first time that I've ever made a show of my own away from home. I've always done it in Chicago and then brought my shows to other places, so that's kind of a big experiment. That was a big experiment for me. But and it's also the only time I ever took a suggestion from anyone about what to do. But I knew that White Snake was up my alley. Most of the stuff that I've adapted and directed has been based on old, initially oral texts that predate any set conventional print form or received form, and that have a kind of epic quality to them and a romantic quality to them and an impossible to stage quality to them. That's a key ingredient for me, is trying to figure out how to imagine things that someone writing a play, a nice polite play, would not prescribe you to do because it would be sort of difficult to imagine how. So the things I've done are like the Arabian Nights, I've done the Odyssey, I've done Jason the Argonauts, I did Metamorphoses, which is based on Greek myths, I've done some fairy tales, things like that. And White Snake is sort of up that alley for me. It's the story of a white snake who lives on a mountain, and she senses that there might be more to life than getting her dinner every evening, and she decides to study the Tao, the way of the Tao, which is both a religious philosophy but also a kind of term for sorcery as well. And she learns through studying the Tao for 17 centuries how to fly and change her shape into a young woman. And her friend, the green snake, decide one night, to go down the mountain for just one day to find out what the human world is like, just one day, and then they're going to come right back up. And they go to a beautiful garden. It's a famous real place in Hangzhou, the West Lake, in the gardens of the West Lake. And while they're there, of course, White Snake sees a young man carrying an umbrella, and she just has a sort of feeling about him. Now, some versions of the story, the reason she has that feeling is because when she was many reincarnations before, just a little white snake on the earth, a previous reincarnation of that young man saved her from being killed by a woodcutter at the side of the road. And so she sort of owes him. And one of the things we try to do in our little production is give nod to different versions of how the story goes. And periodically throughout the evening, one of the little narrators will say, "Here our story forks," and sort of tell both versions of what happened rather quickly, or put emphasis on one or on the other. And so in some versions she knows about this debt she owes to this guy. In others she has no knowledge of that at all. She just sees someone and she falls in love with him. But she does fall in love with him, and her gal pal Greenie, the green snake, seduce him into marrying her in that night. And they open a pharmacy. And that's the great charm of this story to me, is how it mixes the fantastical and the supernatural with the utterly everyday and banal, and in a kind of unquestioned way, a kind of magical realism way, in a way. And she's keeping her snake identity secret from her husband, of course. And yet they're living very happily, her and Greenie and Zhuzhan, his name is, her husband, who owns the pharmacy. But pretty soon their happy lives are interrupted by, and this is another great, to me, charm of the play, the evil, villainous character is a Buddhist monk. And the Buddhist monk cannot bear that this man is married to a white snake spirit, and men don't marry snakes, and it's an immoral alliance. And he spends the evening trying to separate them and telling Zhuzhan, "You're married to a snake." And Zhuzhan will never believe him. The way it ends is up to debate, and we sort of touch on the three little endings. I don't want to overemphasize this. It's not a sort of academic thing, and you do have a sense of a narrative through line for sure. Like, we sort of pick the version that we like the best, but we do give nod to the various endings of it. I would describe the evening as short. Relatively speaking. It's a one act at the moment, and no one's putting any pressure on me to divide it. It could be divided. It's about an hour and 38 minutes. I'd be so happy if we could say it's 95 minutes, it's 93 minutes. Right now we have to say it's 97 minutes, which are 98, which is more like saying it's an hour 40, which isn't as appealing, but it still has enormous momentum, I think. It's action-packed. In spite of the fact that they're running a pharmaceuticals business, pretty soon she's engaged in gigantic water battles with the Buddhist monk to free Zhuzhan, who was kidnapped up at the monastery, and it's very delightful, and it's very entertaining, and I think one question is, what ages is it for? I do sort of refer to it as Romeo and Snake. It is a romantic tragedy in a way. Well, not in a way, it is. Though we provide a kind of, I hope, sort of transcendent ending to it where you can sort of hope for this divine reunion of the two. But actually, the evil monk does win, and it's in quite a traumatic scene, actually. So I don't know, and I don't have kids myself, but I think from 8 or I think like 10 to 12, especially girls, are gonna just love this show because it's these gal pals, Greenie and Whitesnake, against the world, and they're like little fighting spirits, and it's just it's an adorable relationship. One of the things that we do visually that I knew I was going to do from the beginning, or wanted to, is okay, how to do the snakes. And we do them in multiple ways, and just in the way that the Lady Whitesnake is capable of changing her form, and the way a snake sheds his skin, we wanted to represent the snakes in different ways. So sometimes they're these, I think, pretty great, I guess you'd call them puppets. They're objects that are held by two different dowels, and they're actually made out of dryer vent hose, which is exactly snake-like, and but dolled up. They look much more like snakes. And that's one way, with the character of Whitesnake manipulating the white snake and the character of Green Snake manipulating the green snake. They are also represented by like 9 people carrying 9 parasols of graduated size to smaller size and sort of roiling them around. They're also represented by like a little tiny one of those little tiny wooden toy snakes. There's also a surprising large snake-like snake that's a surprise. And I feel like I'm missing, and then there's sometimes they're in their full Chinese costumes with, the ladies have their tails hanging out underneath their robes. When they're upset, their tails come out, their snake-like nature more manifests itself. And, so I think, my philosophy in doing in the show business is that it should always be blossoming, that the eye should always be being, and the attention should always be being refreshed. And so as often as I can, something new happens on the stage, some way of presenting something that's hopefully unique and enlists the powers of the audience suggestively. Even the ways I've just described the snakes, you have to say, oh, I understand those parasols are moving sort of in the way a snake does. And in that way, I feel like we're reaching across the footlights and joining hands to make that image. So I don't know really what else to say about it, except that in spite of its sort of ancient pedigree, it's centuries and centuries old, millennia old, don't feel that it is foreign or difficult or inaccessible in some way. It really is. It's both archetypal in the story of being star-crossed lovers and utterly familiar in that way. And at the same time, it does have beautiful costumes that we're not used to seeing, and sort of you know, this word is a vexed word in our contemporary society, but an exoticism that is sort of beautiful and romantic, at least to me, it still is. And we've had a riot, you know, doing it. My method of working is I start with no script, and I write the script in between rehearsal and the wee hours of the morning, and I'm inspired by what's happened that day and by the cast I have. Within 10 days or so, I'm writing for them, for their voices. I should also mention we too have 3 live musicians, one of which I brought from Chicago because I've worked with them a lot. And he plays pipa, a sort of Chinese lute-plucked instrument, and he plays a million percussion instruments. And then we have an unbelievably gorgeous local cello player, Michał, I don't know his last name, he's Polish, and Tessa, our flautist. You probably might know these people. And they're a very brilliant trio. My design team is the same team I've worked with, give or take, some detours, but mostly for 15 years and at least that many productions. It's the team I did Metamorphoses which is my best known show, and it's all of them I brought with me. They're used to working in this kind of crazy way, and you know, we have a long-standing relationship, I hope. So I have like real love of the show, I have to say. I have full confidence in it. And I'm happy to bring a one-act show to the festival because I think just the nature of the repertoire, the shows do tend to be longer, and if you're coming and seeing a lot in a few days, I think it's nice to, you know, have this, and I think it's a quite intense experience, I have to say. And then sort of be like, what did that happen? That's what I want people to sort of think when it's over. And then go on, you know, have a couple extra hours for dinner or whatever. Thank you.